Hey there, everyone. It's Cassandra from CassandraTyndall.com. Welcome to another video. It's really great to have you back. Today, I want to have a little bit of a discussion, talk about the upcoming lunar eclipse in Scorpio. It's been a massive week astrologically. We've had the ingress of Jupiter into Aries. We've had Mercury station retrograde in Gemini. And of course, the week sort of, and the end of this week and early next week gets capped off with the total lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So we get the next chapter or the next installment of this season of eclipses. This particular eclipse, obviously, perhaps a little bit more spicy than the one we had a couple of weeks ago in Taurus. So I want to just give you a few tips, break down the eclipse chart a little bit, and more than anything else, just kind of help you navigate these next several days. Before I do, I just want to also let you know that my calendar is open for consultations. So if you're looking to, been on trying to get in, it's been pretty full on at the moment. I've blocked off my calendar to do some other projects. It's reopened now. So you're probably looking at maybe 2 to 3 weeks, give or take, to get an appointment. So get in if you're looking for some insight and guidance in respect to your own birth chart. So speaking of calendars, I also just want to make a brief mention of a fabulous product that I think needs a little bit more love astrologically, and that is a beautiful transit integration software that goes into your Google Calendar. So Robin over at Wicked Veracity shared with me something she created to solve a problem in her life, which for me as a Mercury with Gemini rising, I was so excited to get some new software and gadgets. I just want to share my screen with you so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. And so basically this software, this is a bit of an example of my week. You can see how there is different integrations. Like you see the first quarter moon, you can see when the moon went into Virgo, when Mercury stations retrograde, and there's also like timing there as well. And of course, on a week, this looks quite quiet because it was just riding all week. But, if I've got a really action-packed week, I can just easily switch that off. I can switch the lunar calendar off to get more of a view of what my actual appointments are. So I loved this because then I don't have to flip over to Solar Fire or Solar Gold or whatever it is that I have on my phone. If some event happens while I'm out and about, I can just open up my calendar and go, oh, well, the moon is making an aspect to Pluto. And, I can sort of keep my finger on the astrological pulse. So if you're a transit tracker and you really love to embody the astrology into your daily life, I'll pop a link below where you can check out the product, and you will also get a little 10% off bonus from me and from Robin at Wicked Veracity as well. Okay, this lunar eclipse. So speaking of screen shares, let's go back to Solar Fire right now. And this eclipse chart is set to my own location, which is Brisbane. So when we're talking eclipses, I think the first thing to remember is that it's not going to impact everybody the same, okay? So if you don't have what I would call a nodal chart, what I mean by that is if you don't have planets conjoined, and I mean conjoined, not a trine, not a sextile or a sesquiquadrate or what have you. If you don't have planets conjoined a node, then you're probably not too nodal. If you don't have, if you're not born on or around an eclipse, or maybe if the rulers of your nodes, there's a lot of ways to look at that, but and that's obviously a topic for another discussion, but the idea is that not everyone's going to be impacted by eclipses as directly or in the same way. But what you'll probably notice is themes or experiences that are repetitive, dependent on the houses that these eclipse this eclipse cycle activates in your birth chart. So the Taurus Scorpio axis. And so each 6 months, we get, over a course of 18 months, we usually get, we had the initial one in November, which was a lunar eclipse in November, a little partial eclipse there. Then we had the solar eclipse in Taurus a couple of weeks ago. And now we're coming up to the total lunar eclipse in Scorpio this week. Okay, so it's like we just get these little waves or these little additional character or plot, like additional character or additional plot line into the themes of the houses. So for me personally, this is 6th and 12th for me. So I don't really feel that this is a huge impact, but, you know, like what often happens with an eclipse, the event happens and then nothing happens, but you can often get that 2020 hindsight, or you look back and you're like, oh yes, there's that common theme that happened in November and this seems to be peaking again. Or back when we had the last installment of Taurus Scorpio eclipses, which we're looking at from the top of my mind, about 2012, 2013, you might see some similarities around the house topics. Okay, obviously same, but different. So this particular eclipse happens at 25 degrees of Scorpio. So when we're looking at the actual chart, we can see that it's super close to the South Node. Okay, so obviously a total eclipse. So the closer the eclipse occurs, the new moon or the full moon occurs to the nodes, the more totality that particular eclipse will have. And so when we have more totality, we have potentially more impact or more drama or more effects, if you like. So we've got a couple of things here when it comes to breaking down some of the symbolism of this eclipse. Firstly, we have a full moon in Scorpio, which in of itself is already the moodiest of all the moons. You know, the moon is particularly, you know, she is defined as being in her fall in this particular placement. So she's opposite to the sign that she's exalted in. Okay, so the moon, you know, on paper is not as functional. She's not as cozy. She's, you know, she's more deep and penetrative and looking beneath the surface. You know, she's not seeking sort of that simplicity or that comfort that is suggested by Taurus. So there is that still waters run deep vibe there with Scorpio. It's water, it's fixed water. So it's holding on to emotion, it's holding on to feelings. And that can be good and it can be not good. It depends on the situation. And she's also conjoined the South Node. So we've got this double whammy or this double influence of a purgative, purifying, a leaking out energy. You know, so to me, this speaks of something still or stagnant or complex that needs to be released. It needs to be let go of. It needs to be eliminated. So the South Node is symbolic of the dragon's tail. Okay, so the body without its head severed with the stomach. You know, if you research or Google, you know, every culture on Earth has had some type of mythology or idea around a serpent dragon. And so, you know, that devours and then sort of spews or spits out. And so the South Node does represent that, the emptying out, and that emptying out can be elimination through the body. It can be elimination of materialism or material things or ambition or hunger. It's a, I wouldn't go so far as to say a detachment, but there's something about the South Node that is more geared towards outer worldliness or not of this worldness. So when we have the full moon, you know, eclipsing, you know, this point of the sky, there is this suggestion here to turn away from something or let go of something. And this might be an emotion, a feeling, an experience. What are you holding on to that may not be kind of serving you? What needs to be let go of or released or surrendered, if you like? So again, look to your Scorpio house, and that might give you a few tips or clues around how to do that. So the next thing that I would look for in this chart is, what is the eclipse ruler? So we're looking here at Mars in Pisces. Okay, so this is a bit of a different type of ruler than what we had when the new moon eclipse or the solar eclipse was in Taurus, and Venus was at her exaltation degree conjoined Jupiter. So we've got a bit of a different plot line, or a bit of a different character sort of being the signature of this eclipse. And so while on paper, Mars in Pisces is not very functional, if you think about it, you can't wield a sword in water, right? And I thought about that analogy, and then I thought about it some more. And yeah, it would be very hard to try and like have a sword fight underwater. But it's really, when I thought about that more, and then I thought, well, I've seen the movies, I've watched the blacksmiths. I mean, I'm not a blacksmith myself, of course, but they've got this steel and it's hot, it's red hot, and they're pounding it with a stone or some other piece of, implement. And then it's burned, and then it has to go in water as to kind of like set that steel. I watched some YouTubes about it ages ago about blacksmithing, metalsmithing. Is fascinating. And I'm sure that people who work with jewelry, for instance, would probably have more of an idea of how this works. But the point being is that while it might be hard to wield a sword in water, water is part of making the sword. Okay, so this eclipse may not feel great. It may not be excellent for going out there and doing the thing you want to do, which we may all be anticipating, of course, because now we have Jupiter in a Mars-ruled sign. But because water is still a functional component of making the sword, this eclipse could suggest that there's something to it that could maybe like make you, or be necessary, even though it may not be very easy or functional at the time. So something to think about there. We've got Mars in a water sign. So again, we've got more water here. It's making an applying trine aspect back to the eclipse point. So there is some type of cutting or surrendering or letting go. Like there is an emotional vibe here. It's water. And of course, that Mars is conjoining Neptune. And so again, that more of that water. So this could bring about themes of emotional intensity, potentially surrendering to a situation or letting go of something. So much about the South Node is that purgative, purifying influence. So with the Mars conjoining Neptune, there's themes of redemption and compassion here. Maybe thinking, let go and let God potentially. Maybe there's some idea here that if someone's offering you that forgiveness or that compassion or that potential olive branch, are you holding on to the past, or you're holding on to the hurt? Or are you trying to make that amends with somebody else, and they're not meeting you halfway, so to speak. So either way, there's going to be a bit of drama. It is a Scorpio full moon after all. It's going to be intense, and it's going to be emotional with this huge body of water being active in this particular eclipse. And a lot of people that I've been speaking with are talking a lot about this anticipation, this excitement, this, okay, Jupiter is in Aries now, when's things going to happen kind of thing. And I really do feel like this eclipse is that chance for something that might have been lying stagnant, hidden, or dormant to get backlit. And you've got to turn your head back towards it and go, okay, I'm going to forgive that. I'm going to let go of that. I'm going to make peace with that. And of course, that doesn't necessarily mean to say, you know, the problem or the situation is okay. I'm just going to not carry the burden of it anymore. Okay. So there's definitely some emotions. Now, the eclipse itself is really interesting, and I find the whole mythology of the nodes and eclipses and the astronomy of eclipses really fascinating as well, because we often talk about eclipses as being disruptions to the regular lunation cycles. And that's true. They are a disruption because it's outside of the norm. But going a little bit deeper and, you know, just sort of touch on this as a concept, what we actually do get with an eclipse is that the nodes, well, firstly, it's the sun and the moon, not only aligning at the same zodiacal degree, but also in the same plane as the earth. So the sun, the moon, and the earth are in full alignment. So that's why we get either the sun blocked or the moon, or the earth blocking the moon, and that moon refracting back that red light, which we'll get this time because it's a total lunar eclipse. So in actual fact, eclipses are a more perfect or aligned lunation than the ones that we get every single month. But because they're different, because they're unique, and because they're relatively rare compared to all of the other lunations, they feel disruptive. So when you can tune in or tap into an eclipse, I feel that it really reveals something that may not always be obvious or instantly visible with a regular lunation. Because if you think about it, something seen, unseen, and then seen again. And so eclipses also remind us that there's a direct line of contact or communication from the luminaries to us. So they speak louder, they have more volume, and therefore more intensity. Of course, some people are more sensitive to eclipses than others. You know, my sect light is conjoined a node, and I guess, you know, my chart is kind of nodal, but I don't particularly feel that eclipses are all that impactful for me personally. I just don't really feel like I connect to them, or I do connect to them, but I don't necessarily experience them energetically, I should say. Maybe it's because of my Jupiter. It's just so big on the ascendant that it kind of bounces everything off. But there is this idea here that the planets, or the luminaries in this case, have a direct line of contact. So dreams can be more vivid, sleep can be disruptive, the fatigue can be really real. So particularly because this is a South Node eclipse, and the idea of like a reductionist, in the sense that it's a minimalist, it's south nodal. So there's this idea of cleanse, purifying, less, like there's a lessening when we talk about the South Node. So some people choose to be very light with their food. Some people opt to fast. FYI, I don't ever do any of those kind of things, because I'm just I'm always eating. I couldn't, like, fasting for me is punishment, and I'm certainly not going to do that. But for some people, it really works for them. Salt is very cleansing, it's very refining, it's very purifying. So you might take some inspiration from your own Scorpio house to how you manage or work with this particular eclipse. So some of the key themes too with particularly a South Nodal eclipse can be stomach upsets, because obviously when there's a lot of emotion, it can be hard to eat. It can upset the tummy as well. And so the elimination of Scorpio and the elimination of the South Node can literally kind of mean for some people that there's some, going to the bathroom or bringing something back up. So stomach upsets are very much a thing. And that's why some people choose to eat light during eclipses. So to sort of summarize, what might you need to forgive? What might you need to show more compassion for or towards, including yourself? What old emotions or thought patterns are not working so well for you? And what are you holding on to, whether it's a feeling, it might be in the body, it could be something that happened back from the last eclipse cycle. You know, is there a fear of pain? Is there a fear of vulnerability? All of these type of Scorpio ideas. And ultimately, Scorpio wants that deep intimacy. It wants that real deep connection, that trust, that honesty, and that loyalty. So what's holding you back or somebody else back from experiencing that? So the idea here too is that Jupiter's just moved into Mars's other sign, which is Aries, which is very different to Scorpio. So I feel like this eclipse is kind of backlighting that Jupiterian possibility because the ruler is in a Jupiter ruled sign. So in order to kind of make those leaps and bounds and take the action that Jupiter in Aries promises, this eclipse is like that one last look back. What do we need to surrender, release, let go, forgive, show more compassion around? So this is a real snake shedding skin kind of eclipse before we can then move on to that fresh, spring-like, active enthusiasm of Jupiter in Aries. So the Mars-Neptune aspect might help you soften some edges. Maybe there's some confrontation that needs to take place, or some discussions. You know, Mercury's retrograde too. You know, might just soften the edges a little bit, you know, leaning into forgiveness as opposed to holding on to that Scorpio grudge. Maybe we can open up to some vulnerable emotions a little bit more easily as well, or feel into things that we might reject or deny or turn away from. So maybe practice being a little bit more fluid and being less attached to an outcome or a potentiality. It's kind of going with the flow a little bit. So Mars Neptune still can be a little bit confusing, a little bit exploratory, like, am I going this way? Am I going like that way? And that might be a part of, moving forward with Jupiter in Aries, is this one little look back, and what do we need to let go of? Like a good haircut, taking a few inches off and you feel like a new person. So do look to your Scorpio house. What do you need to clean up or take care of or reflect back on in order to move onwards and upwards? This particular lunation will close out this season, of course. And we won't receive eclipses along this axis again until late October, early November. So do take care under this eclipse. Do rest, do hydrate. Don't demand too much of yourself. If you need to sink into the feelings and brood a little bit, that's part of that purifying process. But as a therapist once said to me, you can lift the lid on something, you get to choose how much oxygen you give to it. So you don't have to sit in that Scorpio mess if you don't want to. All right, everybody, I hope that's given you a few ideas for these next few days. And I really do look forward to seeing you in the next installment here on YouTube. So until next time, I wish you all the best for the eclipse. Feel free to drop a comment below. And of course, if you want to subscribe, that would be amazing as well. So see you next time.